So in this video, we're going to talk about surfacing our combined cache. So what I'm just going to do actually is I want to bring in the collision. That's all the way up here, the fountain. So I'm just going to actually nick these two nulls, Control C, and just paste them down here. It doesn't add any, let's just plug this together. It doesn't add any extra really to use another object merge, but sometimes it can just keep your network a bit tidier. We're going to want this collider for when we come to do the surfacing of this mesh. So we've got our two bits that we're interested in. So what I'm going to do is just make another null here. Call this combined cache. There we go. So let's put another network box around this lot so we can keep track of what we're doing. We'll call this combine hashes. Let's give it a maybe a green color. Combine caches. There we go. So slowly but surely we work our way down the network. So again, we're going to use a particle fluid surface node. So by default, it's going to create a surface for us. Let's just set this to particles for speed for the minute. So here we can just plug in our combined mesh, and we can preview what's going on. Remember, we can set the visualizer here to velocity. We can see our combined cache playing through here. And we probably have quite a few points, 4 million points, which is quite a lot of detail going on there. Cool. So what I want to do now is talk about these settings. So when we come to do the mesh, let's set this to surface polygons. You'll see it can take a while. There's a couple of things we can do to speed this up. First thing we do is just turn off this transfer attributes. And then we could turn off container as well. That could speed it up a little bit, although it's not really going to help us much in this case. We can see it doesn't look very good. It doesn't look very good because we've got the we need to set some settings up. Now normally often you'd plug the second input in the container, and that allows it to read some data from the simulation itself, particularly things like the particle separation. So this should be the same as what we had in the sim. So if I come over to the sim, where was that? All the way up on this flip container, there's our particle separation there. So what I'm actually going to do is copy this parameter, or you could remember the number, and then come down here, and then I'm going to select this number here, do paste relative reference. So now they're connected, so this should pick up the same resolution from the sim. If you plugged a container in, it should be fine to do that as well. So here we go, just take a second, and now it generates our surface for us. If we turn off the visualizer, and we'll just see it as the pure mesh there. So that's looking pretty good actually, although if a little slow. So some of the settings, the other thing we can do actually is plug in the collider to this third input here. So this is what this will do. It will allow us to subtract the collision geometry from the mesh itself. And again, this can be a little slow. If you click on here, we have this subtract collision volume. If I turn that on, it'll do a Boolean between these two geometries, and there you go. We get a much flatter bottom and a much better sense of where the collisions go. It's quite a good idea to have that on, but often that can be slow to process. We just turn that off for a minute. So we'll turn that back on when we come to look at our mesh. Now, there's a couple of things I want to talk about actually. In particularly these small splashy features. And that we can see a little bit of our double meshing here for where we've got the two bits together. You could, I suppose, delete some of these, but I've not really found that to be much of a problem with this, with all the other extra detail we've got going on. But I'm interested in this area here. So what I'm going to do to speed this up actually is I'm going to create a bound. A bound node. Let's just plug this around the combined caches. And I'm going to hit enter to see the bound nodes handles here. Let's turn that on. Oh, it's not interactive, is it? No, fair enough. So, how can I make this interactive? Yeah, let's do a box instead. So, yeah, and if I do the box like that, template the box, there you go, I can just drag the corners of the box around. So I'm interested in that little bit of the splash, which I just pop around here, was around there, it's a bit over here. Lift that up. So I'm interested in the bit of surface. Let's move that a bit more forwards. That was here. You know, this little crunchy bit there. Let's just resize this in a little bit more. I was interested in that bit of the mesh. So here, what we can do in this fluid surface is actually turn on bounding box, and then it's only going to really calculate the mesh within this bounding box. Now that bounding box is huge. Let me just hit escape. I'm going to set this down here to manual, just so I can put some numbers in. Let's put 2 by 2 by 2 in. And let's set this back to auto. See where that goes. Let's give it a second or two. Oh, that outer box is still very huge. You'll see it's actually clipping off the top of the mesh here. So 2 by 2 by 2 is huge. What I really want to do is read in the bounds information from this box here. And if you look, we've got the bounds here. This is the size of the bounding box. So again, I'm going to set this back to manual, so it's not going to evaluate every time I do this. And what I like to do is just create a spare input down at the bottom here, and then drag this box 1 node in there. That means I can refer to this with a -1 in my expressions. I'm then going to go to the bounding box and type the bounding box expression here. So I want the size of the bounding box. We can start off with bbox expression. And if you look here, it's asking for the surface node, and I could use a -1 now that I dragged that box 1 in there. And it's asking me for what I want here as well. So I want the d underscore, this one here, x size, the size of the x bounding box. So we'll type in bbox -1, comma, d underscore x size. Now we want to do the same here for the y. So this will be the y size, and this will be the z size. Now for the center, we need the centroid expression. And again, it's very similar. You put the -1 for your path for the node that you want to read the centroid from. The centroid is the center of the bounding box, by the way. And here we put d underscore x in instead. So again, -1, comma, d underscore x. And then we can copy this, paste it in here, and say d underscore y, and this one d underscore z. So let's see if that works. Let's turn on the auto update again. And there we go. We can see we're just now previewing the mesh inside that little box. And you saw that was a lot faster to draw. So this is a great way of testing stuff out. So if I run forwards a frame, it's much quicker to evaluate what's going on. What we can see here is, if you look at these dotty bits, if I go back a frame, and then back a frame again, is that these bits come and go. These thin bits here kind of are nice and chunky, and then they disappear again. So there's a couple of things we can do here. The thing that I find the most useful and the easiest thing is to actually come up to surfacing and turn on limit refinement. Because internally it's doing some softening and some refining on these meshes, which can make some of these smaller features appear and disappear over time. If you look now, you can see how little dots stay there. This breaks up into little dots, but those little dots on the forms stay there. It looks a bit rough for the mesh. You don't get these bits suddenly appearing and disappearing again. So that here we're resolving those little bits breaking up and going in there. So that just looks a little bit nicer. I like to make sure there's no refinement going on. So if we come back here, if I put a 1 level of refinement, you'll see what's going on, or 2 levels. You'll see it's actually softening the mesh, which can cause some bits to, like I say, thin bits like this to flash on and off. So I prefer to turn the refinement off, actually. And what I do, it does make the mesh slightly rougher. What I tend to do is add a little bit of smoothing here, just to soften that off again. And although that can be a little aggressive sometimes in making your little pieces disappear and reappear. So let me just flipbook this between frames. Let's do 130 and 140. Just to see how this little bit of soft smoothing would work. So we'll just wait for that flipbook to pop up. And let's just compare these frames. See, that's looking okay with the smoothing on. Here's the bits we're interested in breaking up there. So you'll see these bits fly through the air and we can track them. All right, they're fading off a little bit at the end there. But they don't appear to be popping on and off too badly. All right, they're kind of disappearing at the end here. So we can see what's going on there. Let's turn off the flow, and turn off the smoothing and turn off the refinement. Let's flipbook those. So here's the default settings. So it should look more noisy. So again, as we go through the mesh here, you'll see bits will appear and disappear, especially when we get to frames 135 on this bit here where that breaks off. But it does look overall a bit softer and smoother. This is why I like to add a little bit of, if I turn this off, turn off the refinement, that's why I like to add a bit of filtering. Again, if we play through now, oh, that's not so bad actually. I'll be honest. That's not so bad. And let's make sure there's no refinement occurring. Last but not least, let's have a look at this one. They do look very similar, to be fair. But yeah, if you notice on your thin particles bits flashing on and off, turn off the refinement or just turn it on in orders of 1 or 2. Just to add a little bit, you'll get more control over that. So here's with the refinement off. And we can see there's definitely some more in that bit with the refinement on. That was just a solid shape. Here we're seeing that break up and we're getting those lovely holes. So here with the refinement set to 0, we get much more break up, which I think is a lot nicer, particularly frame 132 there. So I personally prefer the look of that myself. So if I go to 132, where are we? Let's just escape that. Let's type in 132. So again, if I turn off the limit refinement, you'll see we lose some of these smaller holes in detail, but it does make the mesh slightly rougher. But we can just smooth a little bit back on top again. So these are the settings I kind of like to use, especially for these small scale liquids. For bigger stuff, it's not such a problem, but for small stuff, I find I want to reduce the grid scale, and also I want to turn this refinement right down, maybe a level of 1, maybe a level of 0 even. So that's all good and dandy. So we've got our mesh here. So you can move this box around and test other areas if you want to, but these are the reasons I kind of use these settings. So what I'm ready to do now is to write out this mesh. So let's use another file cache. And what I'm going to do is just rename this to combined mesh. There we go. So we want to write out our 200 frames of this. Now, this time, I'm going to turn off simulation because I want to write this out in a batch. But writing out in a batch is a little awkward. So what I'm going to do is just set this up in tops. So let's do that. Let's go to tops actually. And this will, if I make any changes, then I can automate the whole process and regenerate my sims, regenerate the combine one, regenerate the surface. So let's go back in here. So let's grab that wait for all because we want to wait for, let's break that connection. We want to wait for both of these to finish. And then what we should do is do another ROP fetch. Now I'm building this actually if I want to automate the whole process. So technically I should have added this guy, the file cache combined in there too. So we'll do that now, although we won't actually do this one because I've already written it out. So if I open up my AutoSim, find those file caches, there they are. So combined parts is the one we want. There's the render node. So this one, actually we should do the frame range. We should do this as a batch of maybe 50 because writing out the combined cache doesn't need to be done as a simulation. I've got 200 frames and divide that by 50. That means I'm going to set off 4 jobs. So render that 4 times simultaneously, or render rather this one 4 times simultaneously. We're not going to do this one because I've already written out that cache, but what I am going to do is make another wait for all, because obviously we've got to wait for all the combined cache to finish before we write out the surface. And let's make another ROP fetch, copy of that one. So this one will be connected to the surface. So that's the combined parts. There's the combined meshes. There you go, there's the render node. So there you go, there's the combined meshes. Let's do the relative path thing. I like doing that, don't I? Let me just do the relative path thing here. Combined meshes, frame range to 50, and again we'll do that as a batch of 50. So, but this time I'm actually just going to disconnect this because I just want to make sure it's not going to override any of the caches I've already done. So by disconnecting that and making this brown flag on, this is the only node that's going to process now. Oh, hang on, frames to a batch. What's happened there? Let's change this back to 50. So this is going to mean I'll get 4 renders happening at the same time, 4 processes. I've got enough RAM to do that. If you've got less RAM, make a bigger batch, maybe 100, and then you'll end up with 2 happening at the same time. So I don't want to write out just this little section, so let's remember to turn that off. So here, let's go back to regions. Let's turn off the bounding region. So we see the full mesh. Take a second. Let's turn on container and subtract the collision surface as well. And the only other thing I must remember to do is to inherit these attributes here for shading, because we might want the vorticity to come through. Is there any other attributes we might want? No, I think that's fine for the actual mesh itself. So let's just make one last little null down here and call this combined mesh surface or something. There we go. So yeah, let's add the visualizer. Why not? Just for fun. We can always remove. If you add the visualizer, that adds a CD attribute. If you see, it's gone now. So we could always just remove that CD later, but it's quite fun just to visualize it. There we go. We can turn off that box. And we do get a little bit of double banding here, which we can either use something to remove that, but I don't think it's that much of a problem with the motion blur and all the splashes and all the other detail we're going to add in. But you do want to watch those boundaries a little bit. Cool. So let's write this out now. So the reason I did that is because here there's no way to write them out in batches. I did it through the tops so I could write it out in a batch basically. So if we just do Shift V, you'll see there's our 4 jobs of 50 frames each. So it's writing out this simultaneously. Let's turn on load from disk actually. And because we've only got the one job going, we'll see it at the top here. You know, since yeah, it's the output node here that gets displayed at this top level. see what's going on there. So let's go back to frame. Let's at least wait for the first frame, and then I'll pause the video for that to finish. Now that might take a little while. So look at my processor here. I'm using quite a bit of RAM actually. So if you've got less RAM, just do it as a simulation where you've only got one process, then you should have enough RAM. If you've got more RAM, then maybe 2 processors or 3 or 4. I could probably stretch to 5, but yeah, it all depends on the spec of your machine. Obviously, they're going to go a bit slower because I've got 4 going at the same time. So hopefully it's the first frame loaded. Let's do reload frame. Yep, there we go. So there's the first frame of the sim when that's coming splashing down. I could offset this by 50 frames, just so it's already having some interaction with the water at the bottom there. So let's which frame's this? So this will be frame 50. So remember, we're doing it in batches of 50, so we can check out frame 51, is it? There you go, frame 51. So we've got these nice sort of splashes down happening at the bottom there. So we could probably go to frame 101, the next part of the batch. There we go, some interesting splashes. The frame's that 151. Oh, now I can't. I haven't got a blank area to select in here to deselect those, which is a bit annoying. Anyway, let's go to frame 151. 152 is done now. There we go. We've got our combined surfaces doing their nice thing. So I'm just gonna have we got velocity? Let's just make sure we got V. Yeah, we inherited the velocity for motion blur and the velocity if we wanted to use that for shading. So I'm going to stop the video now, and we'll come back once that's completed, just to run one last little flipbook. Now that the cache is finished, it's all completed now. Let's I've already flipbooked it up, so let's have a little look at that. Here we go, here's the flipbook. So if I press play, we'll see that it combines quite nicely. As I said, we do have a little bit of doubling up down here at the base, but I think once with motion blur you won't really notice it. Strategies for that is to maybe try and delete off those particles before you merge them, and the same with the volume, or make the bounds a little smaller before you add that in there. You know, there's a few things you could do to try and suppress that, but I'm going to leave that for now. I'm quite pleased with that result. So we've got this lovely interaction. We can see the big splashes coming down. Where is it? There you go. Got this nice big splash coming down, creating that big one here as well in that area, which is quite nice. So let's just finish this off. I'm going to pop up one here, and at the moment this is where I'm going to apply the fountain. I'm going to create another geometry container, and I'm going to call this water. And in here, I'm just going to object merge this null. So the quick way is to do Control-C, so you copy this node. And then in the water here, we can do an object merge. And then if you paste the node in here, it will actually do the path for you, which is quite a handy little trick. Or if you click on it, it will take you straight to it there anyway. You can navigate in the traditional way. The other good idea is to put into this object on to make sure you make any transforms down. So there we go, we've got our water here, so let's make just another little null. Let's call this water out. I like to colour those ones red. There we go. So we've got our water out here, and we've got our fountain out in that one. And then up here we can see we've got the whole thing going through. Again, if we preview that, we can see how that's going to look. Excellent. So that's all good so far. So what I'd like to do now is stop this video, and in the next video we'll look at creating some white water, or using the new white water solver really to create some bubbles and that kind of effect down in the water here. So we'll see that in the next video.